My name is Natalie, and I'm 33 years old. 4 months ago, I paid $19,500 for my mother's hip replacement surgery. Last weekend, my family gave my sister a standing ovation for raising $2,000. Let me back up. My mother needed the surgery urgently. Her hip had deteriorated to the point where she could barely stand some mornings, and every week we waited meant more damage that physical therapy alone couldn't fix later. Her insurance had a gap year from switching jobs late in life, and the hospital wanted a deposit before scheduling anything. I'm a physical therapist. I've spent 8 years saving carefully, partly because I see every week what happens to people who wait too long for surgery and lose their mobility for good, sometimes permanently. I wasn't going to let that happen to my mother over money, not when I had savings sitting in an account for exactly this kind of emergency. I transferred $19,500 to the hospital myself, in one payment, the same week she was diagnosed. I told my family it was a loan, mostly to spare my mother the discomfort of feeling like a burden. Privately, I never expected to be paid back, and I meant that. It wasn't a hard decision in the moment. It only started to feel complicated much later, and not for the reason you'd think. My sister Brooke is 29. She lives 4 hours away and couldn't take time off work to help with the actual recovery, the driving to appointments, the physical therapy sessions I ran for her myself in the evenings, the months of it. I understood that. Not everyone can rearrange their life at short notice, and I never held it against her, not once. What she could do, she said, was organize something to help from a distance. She planned a dinner at our aunt's restaurant, sold tickets to family friends, and raised $2,000 toward Mom's recovery fund. It was a kind gesture, and it took real effort to organize from 4 hours away. I want to be clear about that because I know how the rest of this sounds. But I didn't see what was coming at that dinner, and honestly, neither did anyone else. At the dinner, my aunt stood up and thanked Brooke by name in detail for stepping up when the family needed her most. People clapped for a long time. My mother cried, grateful, and reached for Brooke's hand across the table. Nobody mentioned the $19,500. Nobody mentioned that I'd been driving to my mother's house 4 evenings a week for 4 months straight, doing therapy exercises with her at my own kitchen table on the nights she couldn't make it out to a clinic. I told myself it didn't matter. I hadn't paid for recognition, and I still believe that's true. But sitting there while my sister was thanked for $2,000 I'd matched almost 10 times over in complete silence, something in me went very quiet in a way that honestly scared me a little. I spent the entire drive home that night wondering if I was being petty. Brooke did something real. She showed up in the way she actually could, given the distance. Maybe I was just tired, and tired people get resentful over things that don't really deserve resentment. I called my husband from the car and asked him honestly, am I being unfair here? He was quiet for a second, then he said, "You're allowed to be glad she helped and still notice that nobody said your name tonight. Those aren't opposites." That helped more than I expected it to, though it didn't make the quiet feeling go away. If you've ever quietly carried the actual weight of something while someone else got the applause for it, you already know exactly where this is going, and trust me, it gets heavier from here. Hit subscribe now, because a new story like this goes up every single day, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever done the hard part while someone else got the credit. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't say anything. I told myself the moment had passed, and bringing it up now would just look bitter and small. So I stayed quiet, and I kept driving over 4 evenings a week, and I kept not being mentioned, and the silence started to feel heavier every time. I told myself I could keep carrying it quietly forever. I was wrong about that. Then last weekend, my mother hosted a smaller family lunch to thank everyone who helped. Brooke brought a framed photo from the fundraiser dinner and set it on the mantel. My aunt started retelling the same story about Brooke stepping up, and this time added, "I don't know what we would have done without her." I didn't plan what happened next. I actually surprised myself. I asked if I could say something, and when the room quieted, I said that I was glad Brooke's dinner raised what it did, and I meant it. Then I said that the hospital deposit had been $19,500, that I'd paid it in full the week Mom was diagnosed, and that I'd been doing her physical therapy myself most evenings since. because I didn't want anyone to think the $2,000 was the whole picture. The room went very still. My aunt's face changed first, a kind of confused embarrassment, like she was doing math she'd never been given the numbers for. My mother looked at me, and I watched her expression shift from surprise into something closer to guilt. But it was Brooke's reaction that I hadn't prepared for at all. Brooke didn't get defensive, which I hadn't expected. She just went quiet and then said, "I didn't know it was that much. I don't think I ever asked." That was almost worse than if she'd argued with me. It meant nobody had ever asked. It had just been easier to celebrate the visible $2,000 than to ask about the number nobody had put on a poster. What happened after that, though, wasn't what I expected either. I won't pretend the rest of the lunch was comfortable. It wasn't. Conversation stayed stiff for the remaining hour, and a few relatives found quiet reasons to leave early. My mother pulled me into the kitchen afterward, apologized, and admitted she'd never actually told anyone the real figure because she didn't want to make Brooke's gesture feel small by comparison. I understood her reasoning even as it stung to hear it out loud. She'd been trying to protect both of us at once, and it had cost me months of feeling erased instead. Brooke called me 2 days later. She didn't apologize exactly, but she asked me to walk her through everything I'd actually been doing, the appointments, the evening sessions, all of it. We talked for almost an hour, longer than we'd spoken in months. Near the end, she said something I didn't expect, that from 4 hours away, all she'd ever seen were photos of moms smiling at physical therapy, and it never occurred to her to ask what it cost, in money or in time, to get her there. I told her I understood why. Distance makes it easy to see the outcome and miss everything that produced it. We haven't fully closed the gap. Family dinners still feel a little more careful than they used to, and I don't think that changes overnight. But last week, my mother mentioned my name first when she was telling a neighbor about the surgery. It was a small thing. It mattered more than I expected it to. Here's what I've learned, and it's the only thing I really want to leave you with. Quiet generosity doesn't require staying invisible. I gave what I gave because I loved my mother, and I'd do it again without hesitation. But I spent months assuming that saying the real numbers out loud would make me look like I was keeping score. It doesn't. The truth was never about scorekeeping. It was just the truth, and it deserved to be said. If this story hit close to home, subscribe. A new one goes up every day. And tell me in the comments, would you have spoken up at the dinner or waited like I did?